The warehouse was a cavern of shadows, and dust motes danced in the pale moonlight, filtering through grimy skylights. The air hung heavy, thick with the smell of decay and forgotten things. Jax crouched low behind a stack of old tires, his senses on high alert. The package, wrapped in oilcloth and tied with twine, lay beside him, a silent promise and a heavy burden. He ran a hand through his close-cropped hair, his pulse drumming a frantic rhythm against his skull. They were late, way late. A tremor of unease ran through him. This deal, arranged through whispers and shadows, had felt wrong from the start. But the drop had to be made. Too much was at stake. He peered into the darkness, his eyes struggling to adjust. Every creak of timber, every rustle of unseen things sent his heart racing. The warehouse, silent a moment ago, seemed to pulse with unseen threats. He gripped the butt of his pistol, the cold steel a familiar comfort against his clammy palm. A low rumble like distant thunder echoed from the depths of the warehouse. Jax's breath hitched. They were here. 3 shadows detached themselves from the darkness, their footsteps muffled by the thick layer of dust. Rico, his face a mask of cruel indifference, led the way, his hand resting on the holster slung low on his hip. 2 others, their faces obscured by the shadows of their hoodies, flanked him, their movements fluid and predatory.
You sure about this, boss? Place gives me the creeps.
Shut it, Paulie. You see any cops? No. Now fan out. Find me the package and the guy who's supposed to be holding it.
Their boots crunched on broken glass as they moved deeper into the warehouse, their shadows stretching and twisting in the dim light. They were professionals, Jax could tell, moving with an economy of motion that spoke of long experience and a shared understanding. Rico stopped, his head cocked, listening intently. A faint metallic click, barely perceptible above the ambient sounds of the warehouse, reached his ears. He smiled, a slow, predatory grin that didn't reach his cold, dead eyes.
Found you.
A deafening blast shattered the silence, echoing through the cavernous space. Jax, anticipating their approach, had sprung from his hiding place, his own weapon barking in the darkness. The element of surprise was his only advantage. Rico, caught off guard, stumbled back as a spray of concrete dust erupted from the wall behind him. His men, reacting instinctively, fanned out, seeking cover amidst the maze of crates and machinery. The warehouse, plunged into sudden violence, became a whirlwind of shadows and gunfire. Jax, moving with a desperate urgency, returned fire, his shots aimed to suppress rather than kill. He knew he couldn't win a straight-up firefight. His only hope was to buy himself enough time to escape.
Get the package. Don't let him get away.
Jax, his heart pounding against his ribs, sprinted towards the far end of the warehouse, where he knew an old service elevator lay hidden in the shadows. It was a long shot, but it was his only shot. Bullets ricocheted off the concrete floor, sending sparks flying. Jax, zigzagging between stacks of pallets, felt a searing pain in his left shoulder as a bullet grazed his flesh. He gritted his teeth, ignoring the pain, his eyes fixed on his destination. The elevator, a rusty metal cage barely clinging to its tracks, was just ahead. He risked a glance over his shoulder.
You can run, but you can't hide.
Rico, his face contorted in rage, was closing in, his gun spitting fire. Jax stumbled, his legs heavy with fatigue, but he pushed himself harder, his lungs burning. He reached the elevator, his fingers fumbling with the heavy metal gate. It creaked open, protesting its disuse. He threw himself inside, the package tumbling in after him. He slammed the gate shut just as a hail of bullets ripped through the air where he'd been standing a moment before. He fumbled for the control lever, his breath coming in ragged gasps. He yanked it down. The elevator shuddered, groaning in protest, before slowly beginning its descent. Looking up, he saw Rico's enraged face, framed in the receding square of light. Jax, slumped against the wall of the elevator, allowed himself a grim smile. He had bought himself some time, but he knew this was far from over. The elevator lurched and groaned its way down, plunging Jax into darkness. The air grew colder, thick with the smell of mildew and damp earth. He pressed his back against the rough-hewn stone, his shoulder throbbing in time with the elevator's jerky descent. Below, the darkness waited. He pulled out a battered flashlight from his pocket and flicked it on. The weak beam cut through the gloom, illuminating the cramped confines of the elevator. He was bleeding, the wound in his shoulder staining his shirt a dark crimson. He ripped a strip of cloth from his shirt and tied it tightly around the wound, wincing as he tightened the knot. The elevator shuddered to a halt, throwing him off balance. He pushed open the gate and stepped out into a narrow corridor. The air was thick with the silence of the grave, broken only by the sound of dripping water. He moved cautiously, his senses on high alert, his flashlight beam dancing across the rough stone walls. He was in the bowels of the warehouse, a labyrinth of tunnels and forgotten storage rooms, a place where secrets were buried and forgotten, a place where he could disappear. But not tonight. Tonight, he had a score to settle. Jax emerged from a side door into the cool night air. The alleyway was a narrow chasm of shadows, the stench of garbage and despair clinging to the damp brick walls. He moved swiftly, keeping to the shadows, his hand gripping the pistol. He could hear the distant wail of sirens getting closer. He reached the designated meeting point, a fire escape ladder leading to the rooftops. He was about to climb when a voice, cold and emotionless, stopped him in his tracks.
Going somewhere?
Rico stepped out of the shadows, flanked by his men. They had circled around, anticipating his escape route. He was trapped. Jax, you were supposed to be gone. The cops were supposed to be a distraction.
Did you really think I'd let you walk away from this? You were played, Jax. Used. Just like the cops you thought you were so much smarter than.
As if on cue, the sirens reached a crescendo, police cars screeching to a halt at the entrance of the alleyway. But instead of moving to apprehend Rico and his men, they trained their weapons on Jax. A loudspeaker crackled to life.
Jackson Jax Riley, you are surrounded. Drop your weapon and put your hands where we can see them.
Jax stood there, caught in the glare of the headlights, the package at his feet. Betrayal cut deeper than any bullet. He had walked into a trap, played for a fool by the people he thought he could trust. And now, it seemed, there was no way out.